Okay, so let's start this deep dive today. We're not kicking off some huge news story, but actually with something probably incredibly familiar to almost everyone listening, that feeling of waking up, specifically waking up to that little buzz or thrum from your phone on the nightstand. And you see it, that tiny bright red number hanging over an app icon. We've all kind of learned to see that little dial-less as just a notification and more like, I don't know, a tiny spark of hope.
It really is the perfect way to frame our modern condition, isn't it? Because before you've even shaken off your dreams, sometimes before you even really remember who you are that morning, you're already mentally sketching out the day's content plan. You're stepping right back into that exhausting agreement. We've all implicitly made this need for constant self-curation. We live under this this sort of nagging feeling that if something isn't recorded, tweaked, made aesthetically pleasing and perfectly framed for everyone else to see, well, maybe it just didn't count. Maybe it didn't really happen.
And that right there, that's the architecture of anxiety we want to dig into today. We're looking at just how tiring it is being a, full-time content strategist for the product that is you. We're not just living our lives anymore. We're actively curating them, framing them. We're not just feeling things, we're branding them.
Precisely. It's like we've professionalized the very act of existing.
Mm-hmm.
We take something messy, something raw and human, maybe a personal failure or intense grief, and almost instantly, automatically, we translate it into this optimized, maybe even monetizable piece of content. So it stops being just suffering. Suddenly, it's a masterclass on setting boundaries. It's not a breakdown. No, it's a powerful season of recalibration.
Ah, I see that distinction clearly now. It isn't healing, it's rebranding.
Mm-hmm.
And that very quick pivot from what's happening inside to how it's presented outside, that really shows the core tension we need to explore, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
Right.
If we look at this through, let's say, the sometimes unforgiving lens of psychoanalysis, we could see this widening gap. A gap between the you that actually feels the one that's messy, unsure, maybe sometimes scared, and the you that performs. The performing you is always insightful, always resilient, always growing, perfectly on brand. And that split, however subtle it seems, is not harmless.
Yeah.
That gap is exactly where our real sense of self, our genuine autonomy, just quietly slips away.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear then. We're going to try and pull back those, perfectly draped London curtains, take off the VSCO filters, and really examine the pressures of the modern self using ideas like unconscious drives, projection, and that crushing weight of the inner critic. The really urgent question we have to ask is, what are we truly pushing down? What are we repressing when we post that picture of perfect calm and success? What truth is being sort of strategically hidden under the aspirational hashtag?
All right, so to really get a handle on this modern neurosis, we first need to look at the symptoms of this branded ego. And the most obvious symptom is just the sheer necessity of constant performance. It's relentless. And this has really gone way beyond just, marketing yourself for your career. We're tweaking our online bios, our professional summaries, even our personal mission statements, almost like they're quarterly earnings reports for a company. Yeah. There's this compulsion to treat identity itself as something fluid, something you can market, an asset.
Yeah, and the exhaustion from that constant split, it's almost tangible, isn't it? It's this internal demand that the raw, real self has to always play second fiddle to the perfected persona. We find ourselves picking outfits not just for comfort, but for aesthetic cohesion, just in case there's a photo op. Or, mentally scripting casual chats in our heads, thinking, ooh, this could have podcast potential or viral potential. We're always anticipating an audience, even when there's no one actually there.
Exactly. And that anticipation, that feeling of always being watched, it leads us straight to Freud's idea of the superego. Now, historically, the superego was, that internalized voice of parents, of society's rules, like a moral drill sergeant demanding we be good, be perfect. But today's superego, well, it seems to have a very slick logo and a non-stop content calendar.
So you're saying we've kind of outsourced that judgment and handed it over to market forces?
Absolutely. Think about, say, your Instagram grid, that, perfectly arranged 3x3 square of coffee cups, sunsets, maybe some inspiring quotes, books you haven't quite finished. Who are you really arranging that for? It's not just for your friends or potential dates or employers. It's primarily arranged for the internalized gaze of this new digital superego.
So that invisible committee we talked about, it's made up of what? The algorithms, those super successful wellness gurus, maybe the most cutthroat influencers, our exes, maybe even our parents' expectations, all rolled into one nagging internal voice.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that committee, it's whispering the same things constantly. Be better, be brighter, be more clickable, optimize everything, achieve peak performance. This gaze is always holding up the ego ideal, that perfect fantasy self, often built from ads targeted right at you, and it demands that your messy, unoptimized reality snaps into line.
Yeah.
Instantly.
What happens when reality just doesn't match the grid? Because let's be honest, sometimes you just want to eat pizza on the couch and watch terrible TV.
Right, and that's where modern repression kicks in. But it's incredibly sophisticated now. We're seeing what psychoanalysis calls the return of the repressed, but it comes back. Sanitized.
Filtered.
Dressed in tasteful, neutral linen fabrics. So instead of grappling with the raw feeling, maybe confusion or envy or real anger, uncertainty, the brand demands that we project calm, serenity, self-mastery.
So basically, we can't just post about crying in the shower because we feel totally lost. That raw feeling has to be suppressed.
We do suppress it, and then we take that difficult, unmarketable emotion and repackage it into something easily digestible, a piece of content. We don't admit to feeling truly lonely. We reframe it, perhaps saying we're in a season of sacred solitude. We don't confess we're overwhelmed and have no idea what we're doing. We announce confidently that we're rewriting our narrative. The truth, in all its chaotic, unphotogenic messiness is just considered too low value for the brand. So the truth gets polished, filtered away. It's this subtle but very powerful defense mechanism. It's designed to turn real vulnerability into something you could potentially monetize.
Okay, so if the brand is the architecture of our identity, then maybe its structural supports are these daily rituals we cling to. Let's talk about the tyranny of the modern morning routine. We all recognize the aesthetic, right? The 5 a.m. alarm, maybe a cold plunge, gratitude journaling with a fancy pen, that green juice, perhaps 20 minutes of yoga facing the sunrise. It's always sold to us as being about productivity, but the compulsion behind it feels, darker somehow.
Well, it functions as an incredibly potent ritual of containment. The rigidity, the strictness of that routine, it isn't really just about getting things done. It's primarily a performance, a mechanism for signaling control, coherence, perfect self-mastery. Yes, partly to the world, but much more importantly to ourselves. You can almost see it as a kind of spell. A spell cast against the deep anxiety and the unconscious chaos that we secretly fear will just erupt if we stop performing wellness, even for a second.
I wonder, though, what's the psychic cost if you skip it? If I miss the gym because I'm just tired, okay, that's one thing. But skipping the 5 a.m. cold plunge or the journaling, that seems to trigger real shame. Panic, even. Why such extreme guilt over missing a routine?
Because in that moment, you've broken the sacred contract you made with your internal brand manager, with that digital superego. That contract implicitly states, thou shalt perform coherence at all times, without deviation. So when you skip the cold plunge, the internalized committee sees it as a major threat, not just laziness, but like a potential dip in your market value, a possible collapse of the whole carefully built persona. The guilt is the psychic penalty you pay for daring to threaten the brand's seamless image.
Wow, okay, that really shifts the whole perspective. So if we take this branding model and apply it to something really fundamental like human connection, well, we inevitably end up talking about dating apps, don't we? It feels like we're not just looking for love anymore, we are absolutely pitching a product ourselves.
We are, and it's a profound, maybe even troubling shift in how we approach libido. Libido, that wild, messy, irrational, life-affirming drive, it's been completely, bureaucratized, tamed. We literally A/B test our profile pictures. We optimize our bios with high-value keywords and phrases about aligned intentions. We're constantly tweaking our tone, trying to sound ambitious but not too intimidating, deep but still fun and approachable.
So it's like we've taken this raw, unpredictable energy of desire and just forced it into spreadsheets and key performance indicators, KPIs. We talk about manifesting abundance in relationships or attracting a high-value partner. We're using boardroom language for the most intimate, unpredictable parts of being human.
And that, rather tragically, is often the very point where genuine connection starts to wither. Because underneath all the optimizing, slick pitch decks, the carefully filtered photos, there's still that very old, very human, incredibly vulnerable whisper, just whispering, please want me, please choose me, please see me, please don't leave me. The brand tries so hard to cover up that raw neediness with competence and marketable self-sufficiency, but, the pitch deck can't entirely hide the profound, basic need for recognition.
And the fallout from failing in this attention economy, It feels like so much more than just rejection, doesn't it? When the matches suddenly stop or the likes on your post slow right down, the feeling isn't just disappointment. It can feel like total erasure, like you vanished.
That's the direct consequence of basing your identity on external validation. In this economy of attention, invisibility feels like a kind of digital death. The lack of engagement, the silence, it acts like a digital reenactment of a very primal fear. The fear of abandonment, it taps right into that infant's terror of being unseen, unheard by the caregiver they depend on. So every unanswered message, every ignored story view, it just replays that core wound over and over. And this makes the urge to post again to get that hit of confirmation, that validation feel less like a choice and more like an irresistible compulsion to repeat. Repeating the cycle, desperately hoping that this time the outcome will be different, that this time you'll finally get the validation that sticks. And this relentless cycle, this drive for performance and external validation, it's constantly fed by our modern self-help culture, isn't it? It keeps promising we can unlock our potential, achieve the best version of ourselves.
Yeah, but the cruel joke seems to be that the best version is always just slightly out of reach. It's always just one more coach, one more expensive online course, or maybe one specific journaling technique away. It kind of guarantees that you, the listener, the consumer, stay locked in the loop, always believing the solution is almost here, provided you keep buying the next product or service.
We end up chasing a mirage, a hallucination, really. We're pursuing this fantasy self that's constructed almost entirely from algorithmically targeted content ads, influencer posts, articles telling us who we should be. This is what we could call the industrialization of the ego ideal. The standard of perfection we're all striving for isn't even our own creation anymore. It's mass-produced, marketed, and monetized. And that makes it utterly, fundamentally impossible to ever actually reach. So the more you work on yourself in this framework, the more you're actually forced to fragment yourself, to break yourself down into parts to be optimized. The self stops being a whole subject and becomes more like a project, a minimum viable persona, an MVP that's constantly being tweaked and refined based on market feedback and engagement metrics.
Okay, and to protect this constantly iterating project self, we seem to have developed a really sophisticated language. It feels like modern jargon itself is acting as a kind of primary defense mechanism. We don't say, I'm completely overwhelmed and falling apart. That would signal a lack of control, right?
Right, we sanitize it.
Yeah.
We might say, oh, I'm just in a period of intense expansion. You don't admit I desperately need professional psychological help. Instead, maybe we say, I'm focusing on co-creating with aligned energies. The function of this cleaned up language is fundamentally defensive. It lets us avoid the vulnerability, the messiness that comes with genuine human need. And, crucially, it often manages to turn that real vulnerability into something marketable. We're essentially packaging our pain as progress.
So if we're constantly repressing all that messiness, the confusion, the uncertainty, the neediness, what happens to the more destructive urges? What about Thanatos, the death instinct, or just plain old aggression? Where does all that unacknowledged anger and frustration go?
Well, it gets aestheticized. Often it even gets spiritualized. We don't get into messy conflicts anymore. We practice ghosting with intention. We don't yell at people who've hurt or betrayed us. We calmly state we're unfollowing for our peace. We tell ourselves and others that we're just protecting our precious energy when perhaps the reality is we're either too angry, too scared, or too hurt to actually confront someone honestly and deal with the potentially messy fallout.
That sounds exactly like the defense mechanism called reaction formation, doesn't it? Where you feel one intense thing, maybe deep resentment or even rage, but you perform the absolute opposite virtue, like extreme calm or detachment.
It is a textbook example, yes. Rage gets rebranded as self-care. Contempt for a difficult colleague becomes about maintaining vibrational alignment or just setting healthy boundaries. But the trap, the danger, is that the anger doesn't just vanish, it's simply bottled up, relabeled, and often turned inward.
And if you can't even name your anger, if you can't acknowledge it, you can't possibly release it healthily.
Precisely. So the repressed rage then tends to leak out sideways. Maybe not as direct confrontation, but as chronic exhaustion or really cutting passive aggression, or perhaps those sudden, inexplicable crying spells when externally everything seems fine. The brand demands serenity, composure, so the fury gets stored internally until it almost physically manifests as some kind of debilitating symptom.
Which brings us to maybe the most unsettling aspect of this whole branded self phenomenon. The way that actual trauma, our deepest wounds, have somehow become a kind of brand differentiator. You see things like shadow work or attachment style moving from therapeutic concepts into well, into personality traits listed casually in dating profiles.
Oh, absolutely. Trauma is definitely trending. Vulnerability has gone viral. We share our deepest pains, but sometimes not necessarily to find true catharsis or to really facilitate healing. Sometimes it feels like it's primarily to get validated, praised, to hear, wow, you're so brave, you're so evolved, your journey is so inspirational. This can become fundamentally transactional intimacy.
The wound itself starts to pay off. It has benefits.
Exactly. This is what psychoanalysis calls secondary gain. It's when your symptom, your wound, actually provides a powerful external benefit, like attention, sympathy, or even a platform. When your pain becomes your personal brand, we risk actively monetizing the aesthetic of the wound, instead of doing the hard, often invisible, definitely unmarketable work of actually healing it. The brand might profit hugely, sure, but the self beneath it remains fundamentally fractured, because the whole incentive structure starts rewarding the performance of the wound, not its actual resolution. It feels crucial at this point to really acknowledge that moment when the tool we created became the master. We started building this brand, this digital persona, often seeking something positive influence, maybe independence, a sense of freedom. But somewhere along the way, the brand itself became this incredibly demanding boss, and we became its perpetually anxious, completely overworked employee.
Yeah, we clock in every single morning, don't we? Performing on demand, smiling through the very real burnout, and often calling this relentless labor self-expression or sharing our journey. The self, as you said earlier, gets hopelessly fractured. And the brand acts like the glue holding it together. But, well, glue doesn't actually heal a fracture, does it? It just holds the broken pieces rigidly in place.
And that continuous, exhausting pressure to post, to perform, to constantly seek that external thumbs up, it's usually powered by something much, much deeper than just career ambition or wanting more followers. It taps into the repetition compulsion. Unconsciously, we find ourselves reenacting our earliest childhood wounds. We keep hoping, irrationally, that this time the perfect post, the witty bio, the flawless vacation photo will somehow achieve a curative outcome for that old pain.
So the child who felt invisible growing up now performs constantly for potentially millions online. The one who never felt truly safe now meticulously curates supposedly safe spaces in their digital communities. Every single post then, it's like a form of unconscious prayer.
It is a profound, often desperate prayer. See me, please choose me, keep me safe, value me. The underlying hope is that this new wave of external validation, this rush of likes, this notification that someone matched with you, will finally somehow retroactively heal that original primal wound of not being seen or feeling abandoned. But it's ultimately a futile effort, isn't it? Because the wound itself is lodged deep in the unconscious. It's in a place that the curated, shiny feed can never actually reach or heal. By constantly posting, performing, you're only feeding the symptom, you're scratching the itch, you're not healing the source of the pain.
And that cycle of engagement, getting likes, getting comments, it feels so intensely personal. Even though, rationally, we know that the algorithm is just code, it still feels like we're somehow craving approval from the algorithm itself.
Well, we're likely not craving the algorithm per se. We're probably experiencing transference. We're transferring that deep, unmet childhood need for the ideal parent.
Yeah.
That fantasized figure who always sees us, always rewards us, and crucially, promises never to abandon us. We're projecting that need onto the algorithm. You could almost see the algorithm as the return of the repressed parental ideal. It's this emotionally neutral, seemingly all-seeing entity that perfectly predictably rewards obedience.
Right. Post consistently. You get rewarded with visibility, stay within the expected parameters of your established brand, rewarded again. It's like basic operant conditioning, just dressed up in sleek user interface design and the glittering promise of influence and connection.
But the really painful, maybe devastating realization is that the algorithm calculates you. It doesn't love you. It measures you. It doesn't see you. And that fundamental lack of genuine reciprocal relationship fuels that deep fear of silence, which can lead to what some might call identity foreclosure through externalization. What actually happens when your phone battery dies unexpectedly, or when you intentionally try to go offline for even just a few hours?
I think most of us recognize that immediate flicker of panic that sets in, and then you realize the panic isn't just, oh no, I might miss an important text. It's something deeper. It's like you might miss being. Without that instant external mirror of the screen, the metrics, the comments feeding back to you, it feels like we almost lose the ability to confirm our own existence. We need the reflection to feel real.
That itch you feel to quickly post something, anything, or just check the feed one more time. It probably isn't just boredom. It's more likely the sheer terror of being left alone with the unbranded self. the self that doesn't optimize, doesn't perform, doesn't strategize. The addiction here perhaps isn't to the technology itself, but to avoidance. Avoiding that crucial, terrifying question you're too afraid to actually sit with. What if me, the raw, unfiltered, unmonetized, unoptimized me, is simply not enough? You're using the constant noise of the feed as a shield against the noise, or maybe the profound silence within yourself.
So if we try to bring all these different threads together, the algorithmic superego, the way we commodify desire, that industrialized ego ideal, we start to see that the core issue might be what psychoanalysis calls overdetermination. A seemingly simple act, like posting one selfie, isn't just about sharing a photo, is it? It's potentially driven simultaneously by multiple, often contradictory, unconscious motives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In that single act, you might be trying to seduce the algorithm, or unconsciously trying to get a reaction from an ex, or running away from grief, or maybe even symbolically punishing a critical parent from your past, all condensed into one highly filtered, carefully captioned post. We think we're consciously choosing the filters and the hashtags, but on a deeper level, perhaps we're being chosen by the ghosts and the unresolved conflicts residing in our own psyche.
And the really tragic trade-off we seem to have made is that the more meticulously we market ourselves, the less actual self there is left to market. It's like each perfectly crafted post is a tiny death of the unperformed, unscripted self. We built the brand hoping to finally be seen, but now, maybe we're truly invisible, even to ourselves, buried under all those layers of aspirational optimization.
We keep chasing external validation, but finding only deeper fragmentation. And this brings us, I think, to the really terrifying, but also potentially beautiful question that we want to leave for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. Perhaps in the silence you might now feel inspired to find. What actually happens when you truly stop? Not just for a trendy digital detox weekend, not as a strategic pivot to a new kind of content, but when that relentless performance contract is permanently, genuinely retired.
Yeah, when you stop performing healing or growth and you just allow yourself to feel it, to actually allow the messiness, the uncertainty, the not knowing who shows up in that profound, maybe unnerving, sudden silence.
Is it maybe the person who sometimes eats cereal for dinner? The one who cries unexpectedly during cheesy commercials? The one who is just bone tired of the constant pressure to be inspirational? Is it the party that simply wants the unmarketable, maybe even terrifying freedom of just being ordinary, allowed to be flawed? The unconscious doesn't care about your follower count or your brand's visual cohesion. It only cares about your truth, the messy, inconvenient, completely unmarketable truth that you've been so carefully refusing to frame.
That self you might feel you sold off, piece by piece, hoping to be loved or accepted. Maybe it's just waiting quietly for you to come home to it.
The answer ultimately isn't going to be found in your bio, or in your carefully curated highlight reels, or even in perfecting your morning routine. It's probably hiding in the silence between the posts. That moment when the brand is finally truly retired, well, that's when the real work begins. The reckoning, the sometimes scary process of unbecoming the optimized product, and maybe, just maybe, finally starting the journey of becoming a person again.